Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon, and I am not here with Gigi Sparkles. I am here with Mr. Aaron Sparrow. Say hello, Aaron Sparrow.
Hey guys, how's it going? We'll see if I can rant as well as geeky.
Yeah, we'll see. So Aaron is on the show because Aaron is an avid toy collector, an avid toy dealer, as I understand it. Correct?
Yes, indeed.
So we're going to talk about He-Man again and Masters of the Universe again, but we're going to come at from a slightly different angle this time. We're going to talk about how this weekend's debacle may impact Mattel's toy sales and interest in the Masters of the Universe line going forward.
I think it was a heavy misstep for Mattel, this show, and the controversy surrounding it. First of all, Leon, let me say congratulations on 200,000 subscribers. The last time I was on, you were approaching 100,000. So this is crazy now.
Oh, really?
200, yeah. So
has it been that long? Oh my God, I'm sorry.
You guys have been busy. I've been busy, so it's nice to be back on. But let me say, I love the graphic that's on the screen. There's nothing that I like more than being told to grow the F up from a 50-something-year-old man in a backwards baseball cap who looks like he's wearing his dad's blazer, who is about to start production on another film that is nothing but really edgy, high school dick jokes. So kudos. Right on with that.
Yeah, well, he's on brand, right?
I guess, but he's technically on brand, but as far as being the championship, or the champion of the fans who is going to say what needs to be said about these properties, that Kevin is long since gone, it seems.
Yeah, this whole thing, and we've talked about this in a couple of videos, and I think the most heartbreaking thing for me about this whole situation is just how obvious it is he was in this just for the paycheck. Like, he didn't care about the brand. He went on record in an interview with Variety saying that he kind of hate watched the show as a teenager. He thought it was for babies. I'm like, Mattel couldn't have picked a worse brand ambassador. In fact, he was on his live stream this weekend talking about He-Man and how He-Man eats pussy, while dropping multiple F-bombs with Masters of the Universe, indicia logos and branding all over his table, his booth.
Edgy.
Yeah, right. So I mean, if I were a brand manager at Mattel, I would be absolutely losing my mind at this point. I'd be like, there are going to be phone calls made first thing Monday morning because, oh my God.
If I was an executive at Mattel right now, there would be some heads rolling on Monday morning. I think that what we're going to get into is we're going to talk about how this is going to affect Mattel. As somebody who deals in toys, who has his pulse kind of on the finger of the fandom for these properties, I think that I'm hopefully going to bring some unique insight into kind of the mindset of collectors. So let's get into it.
All right, so everybody's familiar with the Kevin Smith debacle by now, I'm sure. So let's talk about, Mattel. Let's talk about where they're at with Masters of the Universe and Origins, the Origins line, which is doing very well. It would appear to be doing very well. I can never find most of the figures other than He-Man and Skeletor.
They're very hard to find. And the thing that Mattel learned from past mistakes, part of the reason that the 2002 line died was because they were shipping cases that were almost solid cases of He-Man and Skeletor, both in like their original version, then in their battle armor version, then in like Terror Claws Skeletor and Thunder Punch
Samurai
versions. And they just kept pumping out. So each case, like let's say you had a case of I don't remember exactly what it was because that was more than 10 years ago, but let's say it was a case of 8 figures. You would have 6, like 3 He-Man, 3 Skeletor, maybe actually 4 He-Man and 3 Skeletor, and then 1 new villain. So what happened at toy stores is the shelves got clogged with these different variations of He-Man and Skeletor. People would come in, they'd buy the 1 villain, maybe they'd buy the new He-Man and Skeletor, but they'd also buy the 1 villain. But then you still had a bunch of He-Man and Skeletors that nobody was buying. So, the villains became very scarce. They became very hard to find. And then Mattel, instead of just reissuing them, tried to hold on to some kind of like collectability, which was a terrible mistake. So they'd reissue some of the villains, but like in colors that they don't appear in. So like all of a sudden Merman's wearing orange and his face, face colorings are different, things like that. Triclops has armor that's brown or whatever. Instead of green, and collectors didn't want them because it's like, no, this isn't the representation of the character. These things are very important to people who are fans. So the line ultimately died. And then, of course, the show kind of hit the snags of being fairly expensive, and the Cartoon Network was faced with the choice of a cheaper Ninjago show, which just filled the boys' action slot, or more expensive He-Man, and they went with Ninjago because it was cheaper. The property doesn't matter to these executives, much like Kevin Smith admitted that the property doesn't matter to Netflix. The most shocking thing to come out of his live stream yesterday. And I was actually I popped into the chat. I was watching it. I was so desperate to like vent about it that I popped into the chat of another YouTube channel, My Nerdy Home. And I was just in their comments section, railing against it. But, because they were playing it. And the most interesting thing to come out of it was him admitting that, for this, it's just all a numbers game with Netflix. They're telling, don't worry about it. Maybe 10,000 people are mad, but, we've got 210 million subscribers. So, it doesn't matter. But the fact is, it does matter, because you may have 210 million subscribers and you're starting to lose them as of the last report we saw. Their subscriptions are starting to go down. So, you may have 210 million subscribers, but not all of them are going to watch Masters of the Universe.
Right.
So the people that you have to please are the people that care about this property, and you have failed in that regard.
Well, yeah, and who's got the most to lose? I mean, Kevin Smith cashed his check. Netflix, they don't care. It's just more programming, for their service. But Mattel, their toy sales, Mattel, now I guess they've picked up a little bit in the last year, but they were having a really hard time last couple of years with toy sales.
Not so long ago, they were poised to buy out Hasbro. And now they couldn't scrape the money together to buy Hasbro to save their life. They don't have the brands that Hasbro does. They've lost brands to Hasbro because of their mismanagement of those brands. They lost the Disney Princess license because they were napping on it, because they had put all their money into Monster High and they were just taking the Disney Princess license for granted. So Disney moved it over to Hasbro. And that was a huge blow for them, and like I said, Barbie sales are suffering. So really the only big brand they have that has any nostalgia attached to it at this point is He-Man. So they needed this show to be a home run. The Origins figures are selling very well. I personally have not bought the Origins figures because in my mind, as a collector, I have superior versions of those characters from the Classics line.
Yeah, Classics was amazing.
Yes. So unfortunately, they weren't out at retail. You had to order them from MattyCollector.com. So it never achieved the success that it needed to. And it's interesting because they would tell us that those figures needed to be $35 a piece, and then all the way up to $40 because of the tooling involved and because, but this is some of the most complicated figures that we've made. But they've released these Masterverse versions to retail, which have more articulation and are about as detailed, just in a different way. And those are coming out at a $20 price point. So I do feel like we got hosed a little bit on the pricing of the Classics. They could have released them retail at $20 a piece, and we would have been fine, and they would have made far more money. So again, great product that they were releasing, but they handled it poorly, and they didn't make as much money as they could have.
Yeah, it seemed like they were produced in such small quantities, but I mean they really were fan pleasers. They had obscure Filmation characters. They had prototypes. We got Fearless Photog finally after how many years?
And then they handed it off to Super 7 when they weren't going to do it internally anymore. And the reason that they took it back was because Super 7 was sending in their royalty checks, and someone at Mattel finally noticed the size of the royalty checks and said, "Wait a minute. Why are we not producing these? If we're just getting this much in royalties, how much more could we be getting if we were producing figures of this property?" And so they took it back from Super 7, and they launched the Origin line, which, like I said, doesn't interest me, but has been selling gangbusters. And over the past weekend, so let's say before Revelations reviewed, for the last several weeks of hype, ever since the trailer dropped with the "I Need a Hero" theme song, people have been coming in every week. Do you guys because I do a toy show 2 days a week. I do the Frankenstein show in City of Industry here in California, And it's basically like a convention that's open 3 days a week, Wednesdays, Saturdays, Sundays. And we've had people coming in. Do you guys have the Masterverse figures yet? Do you guys have the Masterverse figures yet? People were psyched. We were getting that question multiple times per show. And this last week, after the show dropped, we still sold a ton of Origins, but only 2 people asked about the Masterverse figures. So to me, that was kind of like an immediate kind of indicator of like, ooh, I think, and a lot of people that came in were buying the Origins were like, oh, have you seen Revelations yet? And I'm like, yeah, I watched it yesterday. And they just kind of like roll their eyes and they're like, oh boy, as they're buying the Origins figures. So it clearly didn't resonate with longtime fans, which Mattel desperately needs it to do. They're not going to pick up enough new fans to keep this line sustainable.
Yeah, it's really weird that the choices, Series 1, I mean, Mossman, he was, spoiler, he was barely in the show. He dies after about 30 seconds. Now, I think Alan Oppenheimer actually gave one of the best performances in the show. I mean, you could actually call him, exposition man, but he was actually very, very good. But it was a weird choice. Where's Teela? Where are all these other characters? Why don't we have a Prince Adam? And of course, we probably found out that the reason we're not seeing the Teela figure is because it would have given away the shaved head look. Now, I thought maybe they were trying to hide spoilers from the show, but they dropped Skelegod in Wave 1.
Mm-hmm. Which completely undermined the finale of the show. I knew what was coming.
Yeah.
The finale of the first 5 episodes. By the way, it really bothers me that Netflix has the unmitigated gall to call 5 half-hour episodes a season. Get out of here.
I've seen 3 episode seasons on Netflix. It's just a chunk of content to them. Like they don't. Smith was very right. They do not care. It's just now what blows my mind though is we've seen other animated series that I think hit what Netflix's dream demographic is a little bit better, like Tuca and Birdie, which wound up on Adult Swim. That got canceled after a handful of episodes, but Masters of the Universe they're apparently thrilled with it, even though Powerhouse is not cheap. So I gotta think Mattel's kicking in some bucks and they're just taking Mattel's money and being like, yep, we're just gonna do our thing.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. And if the show doesn't move toys, then you're going to see it end really quickly. Because when these sort of deals happen, you go to a show like Young Justice, which had a huge fan base. And to this day, there's still a false rumor out there. The reason Young Justice was canceled was because there were a lot of girls watching it. And the executives were like, well, we're not trying to make a girl show. So they canceled the show. That is completely a lie. Mm-hmm. I am friends with Greg Weisman, the showrunner on Young Justice.
Okay, yeah.
We've been pals for a while. Really great guy, and I've had conversations with him and other people on the show. And the reason was because Mattel was kicking in money to the for the animation to sell the toy line. Now the toy line didn't do as well as expected, and Mattel took a huge hit with the DC toys that were produced for the Green Lantern film, because that movie was an absolute flop. And the toys for that, now this is, in my opinion, this is Mattel's fault, because those toys were garbage.
Yeah, they were. I remember those. They weren't good.
Yeah, but the Green Lantern movie figures were garbage. So the line didn't sell well. And they basically went back to Warner Brothers and were like, well, we want some of the money back because we lost our asses on this. And so when Warner Brothers had to concede and give them some of the licensing money back, that dried up the money for shows like Young Justice and shows like the animated Green Lantern that was actually really good. So that's why those shows died. It didn't have anything to do with the demographics. I mean, if you have a show that's appealing to both boys and girls, as He-Man did back in the day and as She-Ra did back in the day, that's you're ecstatic because you now have 2 demographics that you're selling toys to. So.
Yeah, I as a kid, right? I mean, we're talking little boy. I actually, I'll admit it on air. I had a She-Ra and a Bo figure. I'm going to call it a figure, not a doll. I had a She-Ra and a Bo because I needed somebody to fight the evil horde. So I went out and got. So I got. I can imagine girls were probably buying Hordak figures and stuff because that was the bad guy on the cartoon.
Yeah, I had She-Ra. I had Bo. I had Catra because she was Horde, so I was like, oh, I need Catra. And I had Swiftwind.
Yeah, I had
figures I remember having.
Yeah, I had. I think I got the She-Ra and Swiftwind pack, and then I got Bo because he was a dude, And I remember the one, I think I sent my cousin, who's a girl, to like go buy it. Like, could you go buy this for me? Because I don't want anybody to see that I'm buying this Shira doll.
Yeah, but, I mean, you and Geeky are so right when you talk about how kids of our generation, we watched all these shows.
Yeah.
Even if they were aimed at girls, like I was a huge fan of the Gem cartoon when I was a kid. It was an action soap opera.
It was designed. That's the thing that, it blows my mind. Like these shows were designed because they knew, and you talk to TV executives or writers from that era. I'm friends with a couple people that worked on, like G.I. Joe and Transformers back in the day. And they're like, yeah, we had to keep the siblings entertained too, because you didn't want them turning the channel, switching the channel. So, My Little Pony, there would be action elements. They brought a boy character in. Megan had a little brother. Rainbow Bright, they had a boy. They had a couple boys. They had Brian and then Chris with the robot horse Onyx, and they did that because they wanted to keep across the aisle. They wanted everybody to watch the show because a lot of times they would sandwich like Gem. If I remember in my area, it was like G.I. Joe, Gem, Transformers. They stacked them like that. So Gem was like in the middle. So they wanted to keep everybody watching throughout the whole thing. And it was always He-Man, She-Ra in the afternoons back to back. He-Man was on at like 4, and I think She-Ra was on at 4:30, and then like the local news came on.
I think that my local area might have even called it like the He-Man She-Ra Power Hour.
Yeah,
correctly.
Yep, they did. Yeah, I think it was like a syndication package. Yeah, and it was seamless too, because it was like She-Ra for boys. It was more He-Man because He-Man crossed over so often, and since they'd stopped producing He-Man episodes at that point, it was like all the new bad guys usually wound up on She-Ra. So like all the new Horde characters and stuff, they would put them on She-Ra. They'd take some of the new Evil Warriors and they would throw them on She-Ra too to sell toys. So they knew what they were doing. They knew it was cross promotion.
Yeah, and we didn't care. I just viewed that whole hour as just I'm watching an hour of He-Man.
Yeah. It was it. Yeah. And now it's like everything's like, oh, we got to make sure, we don't have gender specific TV shows. I'm like, bitch, please. We talk about this all the time. Like everybody watched Care Bears. Everybody watched Smurfs. Everybody watched. I'm looking at my shelf over here and I'm like, God, boys were watching My Little Pony and girls were watching Transformers. And nobody thought anything of it.
So when you talk about these properties and the way that they're handled, and the fact that Kevin Smith hate watched it and then came in and just cashed a check, I don't know. I hope that I never get so cynical that is my attitude. Like, do you want to do? I've turned down a lot of properties in comic writing. At one point, I was offered Fraggle Rock, and I went back to the editor and I said, I really appreciate you thinking of me on this, but I never watched Fraggle Rock. I'd have to do a lot of research to get into it.
I never watched Fraggle Rock. It was so good.
Did. For some reason, that's one of my blind spots.
Oh God, I love it. I used to watch it. I used to watch it all the time. I love Fraggle Rock.
Yeah, so I told the editor, I said, there's probably somebody out there that really loves it. Like I can watch it and I can find what people appreciate it, and I could probably write a pretty solid story. But there's somebody out there I know that loves it and would die for this opportunity, and so I should probably step aside and let them come in and do it, because they'll probably ultimately deliver a better product because of how much they care.
Yeah.
If you offered me Power Rangers, like if they were like, hey, Aaron Sparrow, Darkwing Duck guy, do you want to launch this new animated Power Rangers or something that we're going to do? You know what I would do? I would be like, well, first of all, hell yes. Even though by the time Power Rangers came out, I had discovered girls. So, and Power Rangers didn't seem cool to girls at the time that were my age. So I didn't get into it. It seemed like a baby show to me. But I do collect the action figures, even though I don't know that much about the show, aside from what I've absorbed through kind of like cultural osmosis and friends of mine that really like it. But I do collect the figures because the figures are nice looking. And if they came to me and they said, do you want to run a Power Rangers show? I would say absolutely. And then what I would do is I would do a deep dive on Power Rangers, find what everybody loves about it, find what excited me about it, and then I would go forth and try to deliver the most satisfying experience for the fans. It's basically how we approached Darkwing. Or any of the Disney properties that I worked on is, and that was my constant conflict with Boom, because whereas it was just a cash grab for them, just something that Ross Ritchie could go in and spread out a bunch of Pixar books on some Hollywood executive's desk and say, oh, Pixar handpicked us to do comic. They've never done comics before, but they handpicked us, which wasn't true. But, you can definitely do that. You can convince that executive that, oh, they must be some kind of great creative force if Pixar came to them. Whereas they just saw it as a cash grab, something to be churned out. I wanted to deliver experiences that were commensurate to the films. So, if we were doing a Pixar book, I was like, I want it to have the same heart as a Pixar movie. I want to be able to hit those same chords. And that's what we did with Darkwing. We sat down, we were like, how do we make something fresh and new, change things up a little bit, kind of hit them in an unexpected way, but still deliver everything that they know about the show, every character that they recognize. How do we do that? And so that's what James Silvani and I sat down and did. And so that's how I approach these things. And I wish that more executives hired people who had that same attitude as we approached it with. Because, and I think that's why DuckTales 2017 was so successful, is because they did find people that, Frank Angonis, huge Duck fan. And whether you agree with every decision that he made or not, that show at its heart is DuckTales, even with the changes that were made.
That show at its heart was more the comics, having we both worked on those comics for a number of years, and there's so many things that they pulled in from the comics that I honestly thought I would not see, as well as pulling from like Disney Afternoon and all that. And a lot of people throw shade at for the art style, and I'm like, no, its core, I thought that was a very, very good show.
And it's got this, if you look at the art style, it's got the tone in the background like comics would,
like a 50s, I thought it was pretty cool. People have actually fought me on that one. I'm like, look, I know it's not like the 80s DuckTales, but you don't understand, the 80s DuckTales deviated so much from Barks, that they're like, well, they put Donald in. I'm like, yeah, Donald used to always be there. He was always there. He was, Launchpad was created as a stand-in for Donald because they thought Donald was going to overtake the show.
And they thought kids wouldn't understand what he was saying.
Yeah, which that's a fair point. Yeah,
it is a fair point because Tony Anselmo, for all of his legendary years as DuckTales, let's be honest, his Donald voice is like Peter Frampton's guitar. There's other voice actors out there that have played Donald that are able to deliver his dialogue more clearly. So you can definitely make the case that there were ways that you could do Donald where he was easier to understand. But the DuckTales team, to their credit, worked around it, and they made some jokes at the expense, like when he gets the Barksian translator jammed down his throat, and suddenly his voice is
Don Cheadle.
So you can have fun with all of that stuff, and this is what I think that Revelation is lacking, among many things, is just that sense of fun.
Yeah, it's not a fun show at all. And it does feel like, this is what we're, Geeky and I are trying to figure out, like, who is this show for? Because Kevin Smith obviously doesn't care. It's very, very obvious that he's not a fan. He wasn't a fan. He lied about being a fan. And even in the most recent Variety article, which I pulled up, he said, he thought the show was for babies. And I'm like, the Filmation version is so important to so many people. It really is. It's we were talking a little bit before we started recording that, He-Man and She-Ra to latchkey kids, to our generation, were almost parental figures. It was like Mr. Rogers with muscles. And they were morality plays, and they were friends. It was a family. You watched a family every day after school, and there was always a lesson, and it was always, be a good person. Always be a good person. Don't be cynical. Don't let this world get you down. This show was just a very, very cynical take on Masters of the Universe, and even the 2002 series, which I love. It's probably my favorite incarnation of Masters. It still has the heart of the Filmation show. They might have ramped up the action. They might have made the storylines a little more complex, but its heart, its core, it still had heart. And Revelation just seems like a deconstruction of everything that people have loved about this show. And I do gotta wonder, is this going to affect the toy sales all the way around? Are people just going to check out and be like, Mattel, you've lost me because clearly you hate the fandom. You're letting this guy run at the mouth who hates the fans. It's not for me anymore.
I don't think it's going to be as drastic as the Last Jedi toy sales, the way that the Last Jedi cratered Star Wars toy sales, and I'll tell you why. I think there will be some effect. I think they're not going to move as much product as they wanted to, or as that they had the potential to. But I don't think it's going to be as massive a drop as Last Jedi, and here's why. the toys still look very cool. And what collectors do is they look at these toys, whether they like the show or not. Let's say they hate the show. They can still look at these figures and say, these can still fit in with my other Masters of the Universe figures in some way. And, you know, whether collectors play with their toys or they just put them on the shelves, they still kind of project their imagination into them. And these toys do kind of capture iconic looks, even though they're the new design. You know, they're very close. You know, Eva Lynn's design is completely different, but I still like it. So I still picked up the figure. I bought all the figures so far. I bought Battle Cat. Well, actually, Battle Cat and He-Man were a nice birthday gift. But, you know, the rest of the figures I picked up. You know, Skelegod totally fits into, you know, something that I might do, you know, if I was messing around with my toys, you know, so now Skeletor is the master of the universe. You know, that's kind of cool. So I think that it won't be as catastrophic. Last Jedi's problem was it was a terrible film that spit on the lore and spit on the fandom, and all of the new characters were boring. You know, you had Rose, who is just a character, you know, with a dumb anime haircut in a jumpsuit. You know, they did Kelly Marie Tran so few favors with what they did with her in the movie and on the figure. You know, the look that they gave her. You know, when I saw her, you know, being interviewed before the movie came out and how excited she was, I was really excited for her. I was like, oh, I can't wait to see this new character because she's just so cute and she's just so excited about it. And then I saw the movie and I just thought, oh my God, they gave her nothing. They made her so easy to dislike. You know, this is really bad. And then they didn't even give her any kind of cool outfit or iconic look that kids could project their imagination into with the action figures. So the action figures died on the vine, and it damaged Star Wars for years until Hasbro was finally able to say to Disney, look, we're not making any money with these sequel characters. You have to let us go back to the original trilogy and do some things there. Unfortunately, there were some anniversaries coming up and things like that. So I think they were able to kind of like jiggle the handle on the figure line a little bit. And now the figures for Hasbro are doing really well because they're tackling the properties that people like. There's a reason there's not any Reys coming out. There's a reason there's not any Kylos coming out, even though that, you know, there are people who would still buy Kylo Ren because he does have fans. But there's a reason that they're not making those. And the reason is because they ultimately do not sell. When Rise of Skywalker came out and we got it in our cases, they were a mix of some original trilogy characters and some of the sequel trilogy characters, including Rey's look from Rise of Skywalker. And immediately out of the case, Rey was marked down to half off because we knew she's 2 per case. We know we're going to be stuck with her because nobody wants that figure. And everybody's going to buy. And we marked down Zori Bliss right away because we're like, nobody's going to want this figure. You know, and it's true. We're still stuck with those, even selling them at, you know, $10 and then down to $5. You know, they're still hanging around. I don't think you're going to have that problem with the Masters of the Universe figures because people are still going to buy a Skeletor. People are still going to buy a He-Man. I think if any character hangs around, it'll be Teela because people just absolutely hate what's been done to her. The whole undercut look that was played out in 2018, you know, and here we are in 2021 still trying to push it. You know, I don't know. One of the things that I do is we with 2 of my friends, we do custom cast heads to you know, customize your action figures. So we're probably going to do a 2002 era Teela that you could pop onto that body. So if you do, you know, even though people don't really like the look of the costume, if you do want a more feminine classic Teela, you can kind of turn it into that. So we'll probably fill in that niche.
Get some snake armor put on her.
Yeah. You know, it's like that's the nice thing about action figures is you don't have to accept the canon that you've been given the way that you do with, you know, if you're a comic collector, things like that. You get to you get to decide what the characters do in your own imagination. So that is why I think that in a lot of ways, regardless of how the show goes and people's feelings on it, the figures are kind of bulletproof to a certain degree because people can kind of create their own, you know, universe with these action figures. So
yeah, I know that the He-Mans and Skeletors were selling. I think you know, Mattel absolutely banked on that, even though they're barely in the the first season. But I'm looking at the back. I'm looking at the back of the box and I'm seeing, you know, Beastman, Spikor, we got Man Arms. These all look fine. It's just the Teela. I can totally picture her sitting next to Carol Danvers, you know, on the clearance shelf.
Yeah, you'll be finding her at Five Below and at 99-cent only stores. Just like you can find the Forces of Destiny Star Wars figures. You know, all the Reys and the Captain Marvels. You know, that they put out in doll forms. Miss Marvel when they did the Marvel Rising series. That all ended up at the dollar stores. You know, it's just. And it's not a matter of men versus women, or misogyny, the way that they tried to paint it. We grew up in a time where, like we talked about earlier, you and I both had She-Ra figures. We both had Tila figures. When I was a kid and I had all the G.I. Joes, the girls would come and play with us with our G.I. Joe figures. And sometimes we'd be kind of mad because they would, automatically want to take Scarlet or the Baroness because they were like, well, this is the girl character. This is who I should take. And they liked those characters. And, sometimes the boys would be mad because it's like, we didn't view any difference between the Baroness or Scarlet from, Flash or Snake Eyes or Short Fuse or any of the characters that we had, because they were another soldier on the team and they were badass.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, too. They never really, everybody's like, oh, Tila was so helpless and Scarlet was so helpless. No, they weren't. Did you actually watch these shows? They absolutely were not damsels.
Oh, when Sarah Michelle Gellar said that the female characters on He-Man were an afterthought, I was like, you have never watched this show.
You have never watched a show. I mean, seriously, like Sorceress is the most powerful character on the show. Tila's storyline is secondary only to He-Man. And then you go, all the tertiary female characters that were introduced, maybe just for an episode or two, they were powerful. They might not have had action figures, but they were powerful. And even, over in, the She-Ra side of things, Filmation created all these powerful female villains, very female centric show. We had, female showrunners, female directors, female writers. So yeah, it's all sham. It's all a lie. It's just disgusting to see, the hard work, I think, of people that worked. And the same with the Princesses of Power, people that worked on these shows who put their heart and soul into it. This is their career. This is what they did. And just to have it denigrated by modern year Hollywood is just so ridiculous. It's like, oh no, it's not us misremembering the show. It's the fans. The fans misremember how things were. It's
always gaslighting the fans. They did such a disservice to the Sorceress in this version. She's so dumb and so ineffective.
She's so stupid.
Skeletor just casts an illusion spell and walks into the castle. When I was a kid and I was playing with these toys, or last week when I was playing with these toys, and you told me that if you went back in time and told young me that hey, in the future you're gonna get a show where Skeletor actually breaches the walls of Castle Grayskull and gains the power, and I would have been like, oh my gosh, how does he get in? And the answer was, he walks through the front door.
Yeah.
I would have been like,
I about fell on my chair. I'm like, are you effing kidding me? I'm like, this is right out of Batman and Robin. Like, you just like put a bag on your head and you walk in. The Sorceress is too stupid to know He-Man from Faker. I mean, come on.
And the idea that, like, since when did they bring, maybe I don't remember this. Maybe this happened in the original show, but I certainly don't remember it. I don't remember the evil warriors getting captured and being brought to Grayskull. That's
they never
productive.
Probably. Now there were a lot of things that they pulled from the mini comics. From I know, like the Castle Grayskull being an illusion. That was actually a original concept for Castle Grayskull from an obscure book and record set before the Filmation cartoon. That Castle Grayskull was the Hall of Wisdom. And then they disguised it as Castle Grayskull. But the idea that they took what was supposed to be a spiritual successor to the Filmation show, and they're like, oh yeah, Castle Grayskull is just a hologram. Like, what? Like, yeah, this whole show is fake.
Yeah,
this whole show is illusion. It's all an illusion.
No, when I was in that chat the other day, I had a few shots of whiskey, and so the filters were off, and I was basically saying that. Kevin Smith, someone said something about like it looking like his I don't want to get like too personal, but they're like talking about his appearance and how he's lost a lot of weight, so his face looks like the skin looks like it's dripping off of his skull. And I'd had a few, so I was like, maybe that's it. Maybe he's Skeletor in real life, and that's why he's ruining He-Man.
God, I don't know. So, I mean, we'll see where it goes. I think there obviously there's always going to be a market for Masters of the Universe figures, and it might be. I'm looking at like it's going to be like vinyl, or people just going to go back to reprints of classic albums. I mean, I'm buying new Beatles albums in 2021.
It's already happening. Yeah, it's already happening in entertainment. Comic books, new comic books are absolute bottom sellers. We actually made the decision at one of the shops that I order for to drop comics completely last week. Because
wow.
looking at the numbers, and with Marvel going to Penguin and DC being at Lunar and the independents still being largely at Diamond, the only ones that we could really justify carrying anymore were the independent books. And that was because we already order a lot of other product from Diamond, so it doesn't really affect us ordering those. But the decision was made to cut all of them because with Marvel and DC leaving, Diamond cut the discount tier. So now books are so expensive and they move so poorly that it just makes more sense to devote that section of the store, that real estate, to something that sells better with a higher profit margin. So we're going to be moving away from it. But what we're seeing is back issue sales are through the roof. Action figure sales are through the roof. The pandemic, for all of the damage that it did to the economy, all of the damage that it did to small business, it has been a boom time for action figures. People and the death of entertainment media, as far as delivering a satisfying product that people want without agenda, without being lectured, is making people go back to these properties that they love, back to action figures, things that don't have all that baggage attached to them. So those things are going through the roof. So it is very much becoming a niche market for comics and things like that. Like new comics are not popular, but man, back issues, action figures, things that people had when they were kids, the revised version of the updated version of things that people had when they were kids, it is booming. And I think that I'm hopeful that this is going to be a time, we've had just the destruction of everything for the last several years. I'm hoping that this is now going to enter into a time of rebirth where people are going to be stepping up and, independent creators are going to be creating new things. What's the next He-Man that's going to come out of an independent creator instead of a big corporation? Because big corporations are so hampered by the fear of getting screamed at by, 12 weirdos on Twitter. That they're sucking all the life out of entertainment properties. They're sucking out all the fun. And so what we're getting things like He-Man Revelation that are just cynical and dark and really dark and metal, as Kevin Smith described it. But it's not. It's just very cynical and ugly. They did such a disservice to Tila in this show. And I think that she, as a character, is the greatest casualty. I kind of, I'm paraphrasing some things that I tweeted, but I said that she's so petty and selfish in this show, and it's such a disservice to her. The show's really an example of writing not from the character themselves, but warping a character so that your script can happen. And, just her quitting as Man-at-Arms, after lecturing Randor and Marlena, who just lost their son. I don't care that you're upset that a secret was kept from you. They just lost your son. And if you are angry, you should be angry that they just, that Randor just tore into your father and banished him from the kingdom.
He never would have done that.
If you're going to write her as angry, that's what she should be angry about. Not angry at her father that, he kept the secret. That's something that you can touch on later as part of it. But her initial reaction should be to defend the man who has done nothing but build her up her whole life. The whole first episode is spent not showing us, but telling us how great Tila is. And then, and how mature she's become and how, she's stepping into the role of Man-at-Arms at the castle. It just builds her up. And then they immediately undercut that by making her petty and selfish and self-absorbed and just this narcissist that cries about the fact that, oh no, this secret was kept from me. It's like, didn't your best friend just die in front of you? Like, shouldn't the grief be and now I understand people react to things in poor ways sometimes, but and maybe, you could make the case that, well, it's a realistic reaction, blah, blah, blah. For some people, but you're writing a character that has to go on and has to have people identify with her. You could have told the same story in such a better way, and you could have not gaslit the fans that had questions about, like, hey, is this rumor true? That I guess it's it's no surprise to me that Kevin Smith, who made his career on shitting on Star Wars, the Star Wars prequels, but is a self-professed big fan of Star Wars. That he's now using what I told you was true from a certain point of view.
Yeah.
Because, He-Man does no stepping aside, just because, like playing semantics with the way that you tweeted. It's like, yeah, okay, so He-Man doesn't make a decision to step aside, but you step him aside immediately.
Yeah, I mean, look, the gist of it, the gist of what we'd heard was He-Man, one way or the other, is out of the way. It's going to be Tila and Andra, and if that is the case, it's not gonna go well because we know this fandom, we know other fandoms. When they sideline lead characters, kill lead characters, treat them poorly, it never ever goes well.
No, and it's the semantic game that they all play when they get caught with their pants down or hands in the cookie jar, or get caught lying. Is that they try to play the semantics game where it's like, well, you said that she was going to be a better He-Man than He-Man, and she never gets the power sword in this show, and
she literally held half of it. I just semantics. I guess semantics. It wasn't the entire sword, but she had half the sword. Yeah.
There's a difference between the letter of what's being said and the spirit of what's being said. And the spirit of what you said is absolutely true. Is that He-Man has stepped aside, and that Teela is a better He-Man, because she's the star of the show. So she is better in this version because she is still going to be the star of the show, and. So it's so ridiculous. It has made me immediately think of that, from a certain point of view.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. Anyway, we're gonna wrap this one up. I definitely appreciate you coming on, Aaron, giving your 2 cents here, and hopefully Mattel doesn't take too big of a loss, and if they do, maybe they'll re-examine some of their decisions going forward. Because when it comes to She-Ra and He-Man, they haven't really been betting on showrunners that have their interests in mind, which is selling toys.
It'll couldn't hurt to if this blows up in their face to immediately pivot and say, well, you know what, we're going to drop the 2002 Mike Young Productions show onto streaming. We're going to dust off these molds that we have from the classic series, maybe add some knee and elbow articulation, the double articulation that the Revelation figures have, which is such a surprise because Mattel's usually super cheap. But if they added that to the classics line, they could sell those figures all over again. I would buy them all again for the added articulation, and they could have a real cash cow on their hands. But it takes non-corporate thinking. It takes fan thinking. People that actually understand the property and understand the customers that they're selling to make those decisions. So, fingers crossed.
All right. So please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Aaron, where can people find you at?
You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter. If you want to yell at me, come to Twitter. If you want to see me post pictures of toys and talk about nonsense, come on Instagram.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We're going to wrap it up. We'll talk to you later.